Morning to all. Isn't it great to be alive on a day like this? Just a beautiful day and a change of seasons. We need a volunteer to have the microphone this morning. And if nobody volunteers, I'll volunteer Sean. Thank you, Sean. Okay, would you bow with me as we begin our class? Father, we come before you this morning. We look around at the change of seasons and the beauty that's involved and truly realize that you are in control. We know that you are our Creator, and we thank you for that. Be with us this morning as we study. Sometimes we have difficult passages and difficult thoughts, and we ask your help in trying to discern the truth in those passages. We know that together we can blend our thoughts and our ideas and come up with good solutions. Help us in that effort. It's through Jesus that we pray. Amen. Okay, we're finishing up chapter 37 of Genesis. In the early part of that chapter, Joseph has had a couple of dreams which he can't wait to share with his brothers, and they indicate that they are going to bow down to him, that as time goes on, he's going to be an authority figure over them, and they don't like that. Also, his father is making a great deal of difference in how he treats his sons, and that Joseph is obviously the favorite. And he gives Joseph a very outstanding coat, outstanding in the sense that apparently it's many colors, and as we see, it can be seen from a long ways off, because when Joseph is sent to find his brothers, they recognize that from a long distance off. They make a pact to kill him, put him in a pit and kill him. Judah suggests that instead of killing him, that they sell him to some traders that they see coming by. And in order to cover up the sale, we'll pick up the reading in verse 31. So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. Then they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "We have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not?" He recognized it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces." Well, it seems to have the precise effect that the brothers wanted. Their father is going to look at that and conclude that his favorite son is dead. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "For I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning." Thus the father wept for him. Now let's look or think about the very first part of verse 35. All his sons and all his daughters. Daughters is plural. We really don't know how many daughters he has. We only know of the one. But there are both sons and daughters that are going to be going into Egypt. You know, we think of it mostly as just the sons, his brothers. But there were also daughters, we don't know how many, that are going. Now the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. There are a lot of parallels between Joseph and Moses. Last week we looked at some parallels between Joseph and Christ. But this week, let's think a little bit about some of the parallels between Joseph and Moses. Joseph was raised up to lead his people into Egypt. Small group, his family. But that was his purpose. He was going in to prepare for the coming of his family into Egypt. Moses was raised up to lead his people out of Egypt. Joseph went immediately to Potiphar's house, an extremely powerful political figure in Egypt. Moses went immediately to Pharaoh's house. There are a lot of one major difference that, at least for me, is fascinating. If you look at how Joseph was prepared for this, you don't see any real direct communication with God. If you think about how Moses was prepared, he talked directly with God on a number of occasions. Bargained with him, heard from him in a burning bush. We don't see anything like that in Joseph's life. He appears to be reacting mostly to events. Not saying God doesn't control those events, but he doesn't deal directly with Joseph as he did with Moses. Okay, any comments or thoughts on chapter 37? 37. There's Paul.
You know, Jim, one thing that I was thinking about was that Joseph's father, he was the favorite son. And, you know, you hear people say, well, which is your favorite? They say, well, I love them all the same. But, hey, that may not be the case. People might not want to say that, but, hey, his father told it right up front who his favorite son was.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we won't admit that.
You know, I think that's something that everyone with children can sometimes struggle with. You want to be even-handed, but sometimes that's difficult. Especially if you have one that's obedient and always wants to try to please you, and the other one seems to be the other end of the spectrum, and that happens frequently. That's a good point. Unfortunately, we see overtly favoritism throughout this part of the Bible. We've talked about that before. One would think that Jacob, after having witnessed it firsthand and the consequences, would have been cognizant of that and not made such a difference in his children, but he did. He did. Chapter 38. It came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her. First of all, that seems like a pretty abrupt change in thought. Going from preparing Joseph to go into Egypt directly into Judah, going into Canaan and finding a wife. But if you really think about it, one of the major reasons that God wanted his people to go into Egypt was to avoid this situation that we're talking about here. If we go back to the story of Shechem that we talked about a few weeks ago, the Canaanites wanted the Hebrews to come in, intermarry with them, bring their livestock, their material goods, so that they could assimilate them and take them over. God sent this family into Egypt where there's not going to be that temptation. They were scum in Egypt. God tells his brothers that sheep herders are an abomination in Egypt's eyes. He also tells them, or he shows them, that Egyptians will not even eat with the Hebrews. So while they're in Egypt, the temptation that Judah has here in chapter 38 is not available. That's just not there. God sends that family into Egypt so that they can become a full-fledged nation without some of the temptations that existed in Canaan. And also, this is not like the event that we just read about where Reuben defiled his father's concubine. The Reubenites disappeared from history pretty quickly after they ultimately go into the Promised Land. Not so with Judah. Judah is going to be the stalwart of the southern nation, southern tribes, after they divide. Going to remain true longer than any other of the tribes, except possibly for parts of Benjamin. So a falling away of Judah at this point is a pretty significant event. As we go through this, think about why these events happen. I want to finish up the discussion of this chapter with why. So she conceived, I'm in verse 3. So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. She conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. He was at Shezib when she bore him. So Judah pretty quickly has 3 sons by this Canaanite woman. And we know, we just read this, and we know that, things might turn out well in this story, but there's going to be some bumps in the road. We've seen, beginning with Abraham, that he did not want his sons marrying a Canaanite. Isaac sent Jacob away. So we've had a theme throughout this part of the patriarchal period of not marrying Canaanite women. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. And Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother." But Onan knew that the heir would not be his, and it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he emitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord. Therefore he killed him also. Apparently, greed was in the mind of Onan. He realized that if he married Tamar, had an heir, that his inheritance would be reduced quite a lot. He did not want that to happen. He made sure that there would not be an heir. God killed him. So we have the two older brothers that are, both have been married to Tamar, but they're dead. There's one more brother left, Shelah. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown." For he said, "Lest he also die like his brothers." And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Did Judah do the right thing here with Tamar? We know later on that he had no intention of giving Tamar to his son Shelah. Now, it's possible that at this point he might have had in the back of his mind that that was going to happen. But we know that ultimately it did not happen. I don't know if there was an option for Judah to take Tamar into his house at this point or not. But he put Tamar into an extremely difficult situation. She is in her father's house. She is, in essence, betrothed to Shelah. And there's nothing that she can do to change the events. It seems like it would have been better for Tamar to have gone to Judah's house. But that's just, I don't even know if that were possible or not under that culture. But the lady is in an extremely difficult situation, especially as she starts becoming aware that she is not going to be given to Shelah. So she takes matters into her own hands. Now, in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shears at Timnah, he and his friend Hera the Adullamite. Hera is the first person that we saw when Judah went to Canaan. He made friends with this Hera the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place which was on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. She certainly is aware at this time that Judah is not going to honor his promise to give her to his remaining son as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she had covered her face. Then he turned to her by the way and said, "Please let me come into you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" And he said, "I will send a young goat from the flock." Now this is from Judah, directly in the messianic line. "I will send you a young goat from the flock." So she said, "What you give me a pledge till, or will you give me a pledge till you send it?" And he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" So she said, "Your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand." Then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. So she certainly has achieved her goal at this point. She's going to have children. So she arose and went away and laid aside her veil and put on the garments of her widowhood. So she goes back to her former life, into her father's house, by all intents and purposes, a widow. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend the Adullamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. Why would you think that Judah would send someone else with this goat to redeem the pledge rather than go himself? Could it be that he was a little bit ashamed of what he did and didn't want anybody to know who it was? And just think of the millions and millions of people that know about it now. I think that's rather ironic. That here he appears to be trying to cover up his act, and it becomes a part of the Bible. Rather ironic. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, "Where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside?" Now apparently, at least, probably both men, both Hiram and Judah, considered that she was a sacred prostitute. That was a common practice in the Canaanite land, that prostitutes could ply their trade in the name of religion. And apparently they would dress, and most of the material that I read indicated that the veil was the key to that. That a veiled prostitute was most likely a sacred prostitute. And they said, "There was no harlot in this place." Nobody was there. That was not a place that a sacred prostitute normally plied her trade. So he returned to Judah and said, "I cannot find her." Also the men of the place said there was no harlot in this place. Nobody had any knowledge or record of anyone being on that corner. Then Judah said, "Let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed, for I sent this young goat, and you have not found her." Apparently what he's saying here is, let her keep that ring and the staff and the cord. We don't want to be shamed. We don't want everybody knowing about this. Just let her keep them. We're not going to try to get it back. "For I sent this young goat, and you have not found her." We've done our part of the bargain. We've tried. And it came to pass, about 3 months after that, Judah was told, saying, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry." This may have been exactly something that Judah was wanting. Solves a lot of problems for Judah. So Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." That's not a normal penalty to be burned. The normal penalty for this offense would have been stoning. Don't know if there's any significance to that or not. but it's not the normal event. When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, "By the man to whom these belong, I am with child." And she said, "Please determine whose these are, the signet and cord and staff." Can you imagine what Judah thought when she saw this, or when he saw this? It had to start beginning to dawn on him what was going on, because he had given this to her on the night of the event. So Judah acknowledged them and said, "She has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah my son." And he never knew her again. This comment, "She has been more righteous than I think is going to be important into thinking of the why of this event. What does it mean? How should we look at all of this? In many ways, it's really a dark chapter in, the Hebrew life, but Judah in particular. There's not much in this chapter that he can be proud of. He even says that she has been more righteous than I. And then the phrase, "and he never knew her again." Another one of these kind of unanswerable questions, but I want to think that he took her, and we're going to see there's 2 boys born in this event, and was responsible for their upbringing, that he participated in that. We're not told that I'm aware of. Maybe somebody else knows, but all I know about their future relationship is the comment, "He never knew her again." Now it came to pass at the time for giving birth that, behold, twins were in her womb. That's a pretty common event through the patriarchal period here that we've been talking about. Twins were born. And so it was that she was giving birth, that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on the hand, saying, "This one came out first." So she sees a hand, ties a thread around it, just in case there's any doubt, any future doubt about which one was born first, so that they would know which one was the oldest. Then it happened, as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly, and she said, "How did you break through? This breach be upon you." Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Okay, which one of those 2 are in the lineage of Christ? Perez or Zerah? Perez. We know that. Okay, time for why. Why are these events, why did they occur? What was the purpose? Are we told the purpose? Why did the 2 older brothers die? We're not really told the purpose, but we're told the outcome. The outcome was that Judah remained in the lineage of Christ. We're told that his wife Shelah was not in the lineage of Christ. So it would follow then that the purpose of this was to remove Shelah as part of the lineage and insert Tamar. Why would Tamar be acceptable to God as being in that lineage and Shua not? Are we told? I think everybody's having a bad morning. Okay, Ralph.
It may be my memory's bad, and it's entirely possible.
Okay, I'm going to have to.
It may be my memory is bad, and it's entirely possible that I'm completely wrong, but I was thinking Perez was somehow related to Boaz, who married Ruth. I think he might have been a grandfather or a father. I don't know why. My mind is getting old.
Well, you know, I think you're on the right track in that the non-Hebrew women that are in the image or in the lineage of Christ, who are they? Ruth? Who was Ruth? A Moabite. Okay? But she did something that was, I don't know, maybe we can use the term extremely righteous, in that she continued to support her mother-in-law. And that was counted as righteousness. Who else? Rahab. Rahab was a Canaanite, just like Shua was. And as a matter of fact, probably just like Tamar was. But she made it possible she preserved the spies that were sent into Jericho. What did what did Judah say about Tamar? She is more righteous than I. You know, I guess if you just cut to the bottom line, Shua was Judah's choice. Tamar was God's choice. And this chapter is devoted to the how. We're not necessarily told the why. All we can do is kind of deduce from the results. And again, this is certainly really one of the darkest chapters in the Bible, I think, as far as a major character, Judah, going off the rails. We see later on. Okay, one more for Ralph.
You know, Solomon, who became king, he was born by the lady who married David, who had been the wife of Uriah. But in the book of Matthew, she is not named. He just said by she who is the wife of Uriah. But that's the only three I'm looking at here, because in one sense they produced David the king, and then after David, they're looking toward Christ.
Yeah. It's interesting. You know, there's a lot of these that we'd feel a little more comfortable if there were just a little bit more said about them or a little bit more meaning. But as always, we're given enough to understand that God is in control. And if you look at the story that we have read here, and we get into the man has free choice. Okay. Man chose every event in this chapter except for the death of and Onan. Didn't choose that. Now, was God involved in the choice? Don't know. We do see, as I said earlier, much more direct intervention by God in the story of Moses than we do in this entire event through here. Okay, anything else? One thought that I had failed to mention is that, we don't know everything that the people know. And as we go through these, they probably know a great deal more than we're told. But near the end of Jacob's life, he calls his family together and says, "This is what's going to befall you." And one of his comments is that the scepter will not fall from Judah's hand. That, especially after this, Jacob makes the comment that Judah will be in the lineage of Christ, and that's not going to change. Okay, let's pick up 39. If you don't have any thoughts or criticisms or disagrees, I'm always up for disagreements. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. We're going to see this statement, the Lord was with Joseph, many times throughout the remainder part of this story. Joseph is going to prosper in every situation he's put in, and it will always be followed by the Lord was with him. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house and all that he had put under his authority. So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of the house and all that he had that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Imagine what Potiphar thought as we go through this story. We're going to, as you know, Potiphar's wife is going to accost Joseph, and he's going to be thrown in jail, in prison. But think of what Potiphar is thinking as the scales that he's going to weigh in the balance here when Joseph is accused of accosting his wife. Here he has a man who he is entrusted with everything, and he has been made to prosper in everything that he does. Material things galore. Maybe that's why he's thrown into prison rather than killed. Maybe. Speculation. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what it is with me in the house. He has committed all that he has to my hand." He doesn't even know much of what's going on. I'm in charge of everything except you. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? That may be a little bit of a strange statement for Joseph to make to these Egyptians. He didn't say to sin against Potiphar. He said to sin against God. So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her to lie with her or to be with her. She didn't give up easy. She stayed day by day trying to get him. But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work and none of the men of the house were inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. And so it was, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of the house and spoke to them, saying, "See, he has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice." It's interesting. "See, he has brought into us a Hebrew." Now, who would she be talking about here? Her husband, Potiphar, has brought in a Hebrew to mock us. It's his fault. Hadn't brought him in, this wouldn't have happened. That's one of the, I guess, truly oldest excuses known to man. Adam blamed Eve, Eve blamed the serpent. Here she's blaming Potiphar. And it happened, when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to me to mock me. So it happened, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside." She has the evidence. She has the coat, the garment. So it was, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, "Your servant did to me after this manner," that his anger was aroused. Potiphar's angry. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy. There it is again. Even in these dire circumstances, Joseph is going to be outstanding. He gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. One would assume, and I guess assumption gets you probably in a lot of trouble, but that most of these prisoners were Egyptians. They were people that had broken the law. Probably many of them would be political prisoners. But here they are, even at this point, as much as the Hebrews were disliked, even at this early stage, Joseph was in charge of the prison. that to me is just an amazing part of the story. How he could step into all of these events and become over, and early on, over all of the things that were going on in the household. Obviously, the key to that is the Lord was with him. The stage is set. Joseph is in place. We're going to see in the next chapter how Joseph's status is elevated even more. He becomes a leader in so many ways. Ultimately, as all of you know, he takes over basically the entire country of Egypt as the chief of everything that Pharaoh has. I think rather than starting it, well, we'll read some of this. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. Now, we don't know what they did. There's some speculation that makes it interesting that perhaps the Pharaoh became aware of a plot to poison him. And he came down to two people, these two, the butler and the baker. Kind of keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the story. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. Now here, it does appear that there are two places that people are confined. One would be more of a house arrest in the house of the officer of the guard, and then in the true prison. And they are, at least at first, put in the house of the captain of the guard. Verse 4, and the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, so they were in custody for a while. They don't appear to be there all that long. Don't know what a while would mean, but we're going to see in the next few verses that 3 days are going to be a very important part of the story. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream. Both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came in to them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his Lord's house, saying, why do you look so sad today? And we'll take that up next week.